Welcome, everyone. This is Recovery Dharma. My name is Julia. I'm one of the facilitators in this beautiful community. And I'd like to begin our practice today sharing with you a sentiment of metta, loving kindness. I paint these little pictures, these little paintings, and on the back I write these sentiments. And this one reads, "May you take time to care for yourself. May you take time to care for yourself." For those of you who practice with me regularly, you often hear me talk about what an extraordinary thing it is to be here, not only in this precious human life, but in a recovery Dharma practice, coming into the presence of the three jewels of Buddhism, the Buddha, the human being who lived 2,500 plus years ago and whose wisdom and self discovery resonates today. All those centuries later, what was relevant to him in ancient times is relevant today. And those teachings are called the Dharma. And the invitation with the Dharma is that rather than lose oneself in veneration to the Buddha, it is to find the Buddha nature within oneself, to listen to the Dharma, to participate in meditation, to go to Dharma talks, read books about the Dharma and magazines and so forth, not so that we can practice a kind of worship about another person, but instead to become more curious about how this wisdom is coming alive in each of us. How is this wisdom relevant to my life today? And the third jewel in Buddhism is the Sangha, the community. And of these jewels, the Buddha held the Sangha, the community, in the highest regard. My understanding of some of the teachings regarding the Sangha is it was the place where people could really test this wisdom, could really put the practices to the test. Somebody in community is upending, and that really challenges our sensibility. It really challenges our sense of patience and understanding, compassion and boundaries. How do we work with one another? How do we support one another? How do we see one another? How do we meet each other where we are? How do we look at our Sangha members, even our friends and our family, not with the lens of who we wish they were or believe they could be, but how they are? And how can we look at how they are and use that as an invitation to explore, how am I engaging with this person? What are the conditions I'm generating to create support, affection, understanding, love? It sounds easy and it's so hard. And so when we show up to a recovery meeting, it's no small thing. And as I've said many times, all you need to do is look around, and you'll notice how many unpracticed, unskillful people there are in the world, and they're not even conscious of it. That's the scary thing sometimes. People just living their lives from one reaction to the next, people just doing this or that, unaware. And here's the thing, we've all been there. I think it's a very human thing. We don't become aware of our behavior and our actions. We don't become aware of our goodness and even our malice until we become aware. Until then, it's unconscious. All of this to say, thank you for being here. You have just breathed life into these three jewels of Buddhism and created a beautiful sanctuary for practice. And this month, what we're practicing is the first of four noble truths. In traditional language, the first noble truth in Buddhism is there is suffering, dukkha. But in reimagined language, I like to soften it a little bit only because I'm not always suffering. That's so heavy-handed. Sometimes I'm just annoyed. But even being annoyed can stir up reactivity in me and put me at risk for acting unskillfully, thus creating more harm, hence more suffering. So, the reimagined language that we're exploring this month is there is discomfort. But not only is there discomfort, there's also its opposite, which is comfort. It reminds me of the eight worldly winds. Where there is pleasure, there is pain. Where there is praise, there is blame. Where there is gain, there is loss. And where there is fame, there is disgrace. These pairs of opposites are constantly interplaying, and our invitation is to awaken to the conditions that contribute to that interplay in our own lives. I was thinking this morning about all the ways we show up to life unconscious, unaware. And I use the term we because, as I said, I believe it's a very human thing. The details differ, but the fact that we go unconscious is common. And again, we're not even aware until we're aware. And I just wanted to share a brief example of that from my own lived experience. And it happened, it happened 18 years ago this month, is when I started this unconscious behavior. And 18 years ago this month, my daughter, who was 4 at the time, was diagnosed with cancer. And for some reason, after her diagnosis and for several months after that, I never opened the front door to my house. In fact, I avoided the front door to my house. And I wasn't even aware that I was doing it. I just never went out the front door. Until one day I did, several months later. And it was the strangest thing because I went to reach for the doorknob, and that's when this flood of awareness came over me. And I was like, oh my God, when was the last time I opened up this door? And it hit me that the front door was symbolic for me of death. And I knew death was lurking, waiting, hovering, pacing outside my front door for my daughter. And I was avoiding it. I felt like, okay, if I don't open the door, then I'm not actually going to invite death in, knowing full well that death doesn't care about doors. When it wants to come in, it comes in. But in my anxiety, in my worry, in my denial, and all of those things that we do, and in my false way of clinging to control, because I just couldn't look at the fullness of this reality, I avoided the front door. I told death, not yet. And then I opened the door. And death didn't come in. And death still hovered around, but I was able to navigate in and out of it until finally that sense of death lingering around dissipated. Not completely, but transformed a little bit. And when I was aware of this, friends, it was so obvious. But until that moment, it wasn't. Curious. So, a question for today is, can you become aware of a behavior, an action that you have engaged that was completely unconscious? You were not aware until you were aware, just like me. And I bring this forward, friends, as a foundation, as a backdrop for an awareness that we all know that we can sometimes forget about. And that is appropriate conduct and therefore misconduct in our meetings, in this space. What does it look like? And when we're all engaged in appropriate conduct, ethical conduct, where we have etiquette, when we're considerate of one another, we create an environment that knows comfort and ease and trust. If, however, there is a Sangha member who is engaged in misconduct, that creates disharmony, discomfort, harm, dis-ease, and so on. And so what we do in our meetings is we create really solid, strong boundaries to preserve the sanctity of our practice, because we want to minimize any negative disruptions. And for somebody who is operating in a place of misconduct, who may be completely unconscious and unaware, when they come across a boundary, it can feel kind of startling and abrupt and uncomfortable. And yet the boundary is there to create a safeguard, to put a bumper up, not only to protect the community of people gathered here today, but to also create an environment, to create the conditions that allows someone to engage in the misconduct a little bit less. And that is one thing about boundaries that's really important to remember. I don't know when the last time was that you encountered a boundary that someone put down for you and it didn't feel comfortable. But the humbling question is, what was I doing where this person felt the need to present me with a boundary? And what kind of misconduct are they trying to get my attention with? For what have I done? And maybe that boundary is an invitation to become more skillful, less unskillful, and by extension, minimize negative karma. Some of the things we encounter as guardians of this space with respect to misconduct is people on video, as you all know and have experienced, who take their clothes off, people who are sexually exploitive, people who wander around in their houses and we don't know where they're taking us. There have been times that we have turned videos off for people who were smoking, people who were pouring beverages that we were curious about. And again, we bring this forward as a reminder, as an invitation to examine one's own actions of consideration. If I'm pouring a beverage that might look a little suspicious, it could be activating someone in a really painful way. If alcohol is a triggering substance, if somebody's working with shifting their relationship to smoking, seeing somebody smoke online is painful and difficult. If somebody is trying to gain access to understanding their relationship to food, either overeating or undereating, watching someone eat on video might be activating in ways we never even think about. And so we bring this topic forward just as a way to really deepen our compassion for one another. We are all dealing with a legacy of activation, harm, trauma that arises in ways that we never even imagined, maybe even weren't aware of until we were aware of it. And so if each of us can feel empowered to take responsibility for our actions, to show up in this space with reverence for ourselves and by extension with reverence for one another, we will continue to create a space of deep honoring sanctuary. If you have ever experienced any harm in any of these meetings with any individual, including any misconduct in the chat, I'd be so grateful to learn about it, to know about it. If you are someone who is hearing this talk and is wondering, oh my God, is she talking about me? Was I unskillful? Did I do somebody to hurt someone's feelings? Did I activate someone in any way and I wasn't aware of it? Please reach out to me and we can have a conversation. This is what maturing our communication is. This is what maturing as human beings looks like. This is what remembering that we all have the capacity to inflict harm in ways that we are not even aware. And we all have the capacity to bring forward great healing by way of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. But we have to open our minds, we have to soften our hearts, and we have to practice engaging skillfully in body, speech, and mind. May you take time to care for yourself. May you take time to define care for yourself as forgiveness to yourself for any past harms, and use that regret to step forward with skill, maturity, and wisdom. When we care for ourselves in this way, friends, remember we care for each other. And remember, Maitri, loving kindness. We don't just love one another. We endeavor to create the conditions by which others feel loved and happy and kind and at ease. This is your Buddha nature. May it awaken brightly and strongly within each of us. To this practice, and we'll end with a dedication of merit. And I'd like to just invite you to come to the edge of your seat. And this week, for some reason, I've been thinking a lot of Roshi Joan Halifax's book, Standing at the Edge. And she talks about edge states in this book. And the edge state is this place of immense growth. But you have to be careful. It's a precarious place because at the edge, if you lean in too far, you fall over, you topple over, you've gone too far. And sometimes when we go too far, our reaction is to lean way back and step several steps away from that edge step. So either we're too far away or we're not close enough. And in either situation, we're not growing. And so we have to come to that edge state, which can be a little uncomfortable because we're trying to figure out what's too far and what's not far enough. And that's the trial and error of an edge state. That's cultivating an attitude of, oh, let's see what's going to happen here. What can I learn? Whoops, went too far. Okay, what do I do now? Whoops, not far enough. What do I do? And that's the dance. That's the play. And all the while, friends, all the while, there's this invitation that serves as a current, and it is the invitation to care. May I take time to care. Care for myself, care for one another, care for the earth, care for systems and governances, care for spirit. So many ways to care. And in your care, may your light shine bright. Have a great day, friends. We'll see you next time. Namaste.